Thank you, Brian. I mean, it's just, yeah. I couldn't actually ask for better words. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to be able to just say a few words tonight. And I'm calling my presentation 3 Snapshots. And the first snapshot is a little kid, a little boy in a kayak. And this picture is called Innovation. What we don't know is that this child's got an intellectual disability. And if we'd rewound 2 years, if his mum had gone to the office that he went to when Caroline was there and said, "I'd like some recreational activities for my son," the answer would have been, well, he could go bowling or he could go swimming. Caroline and one of her colleagues set up in the southern region a program called Pathways. And the nature of Pathways was that a family came to them and said, "I'd like a recreation program for my child." And the next question is, what would your son like to do? And so this little lad came along and he wanted to be a kayak. Oh heavens. A kid with an intellectual disability in a kayak. This is a disaster in the making. However, in this model that they were using, they went to the kayaking club and said, "Look, we've got this young lad, he'd like to be a kayaker." "Oh, great, we're always looking for new kids. He's got an intellectual disability." "Oh, we don't know much about intellectual disability." "Well, we'll have someone there with him who can help him." And so this little boy starts doing his kayaking. 5 weeks later, the kayak club gets in touch with Caroline and says, "Look, that's going really well. And in fact, we don't need that staff member anymore because he's actually just fitting in really well with this thing." So here's this kid doing something that he wants to do, succeeding, learning new skills. And because he's doing something that he wants to do, he's not using all the naughty behaviours that he's used previously. Innovation. The second snapshot is integrity. And there's a picture of a woman, it's Caroline, sitting in an office making a phone call. We don't know who the phone call is to, but I know who it's to. It's to the police. Because she's witnessed a crime occur in an organisation. And if she reports it to a manager, what's going to occur is he'll get one of his guys to have a look at it, and they'll try and hush it up and massage it and make it go away, and perhaps smack somebody on the wrist, or perhaps move the person who is the victim to somewhere else so that the guy who did the perpetrating can stay in that particular house. Well, Caroline's phone call was to the police to say a crime has occurred. It needs to be investigated. It caused Caroline a lot of angst. And it was indicative of what happened in a lot of organisations in those days, where you punish people who don't toe the party line or the organisational line. But as I said as the title of my snapshot, Caroline had integrity. The third snapshot I've labelled collaboration. And I'm in this photo. There's a group of students from Malaysia, and I'm there telling them about what we're doing about restrictive practices. And I hope the message is getting through, because the interpreter is trying her best, but how much of these messages are getting through? Since those early days, Caroline's been involved in collaborating not just with Malaysia, but a range of countries in Southeast Asia, probably 8 countries in Southeast Asia, and I understand a couple of countries now in Latin America. I would think that Caroline was probably the most loved Australian academic in Southeast Asia. And when we've seen her posts of what she's been doing and the admiration with which people hold her, and the way in which she's ensuring that the skills that she has are shared with those other people, it just makes me understand the power of collaboration. So they're my 3 photographs of Caroline. They don't exist, unfortunately. I wish they did. But to me, they were the highlights of the things that I saw working with Caroline, and things that I saw when I worked closely with her at Flinders, and the things that I saw developing with her when she was working at IDSC, many more years than either of us care to remember. So Caroline, I echo Brian's remarks. All the best in your new career.
Thank you.
I know that those qualities will continue. They've served you well, and I know they'll serve you well in the future.
Thank you.
Caroline.
Before I let you talk, Caroline, can I ask, so many of us have gone back so far with Caroline as well too. Is there anyone else in the room who'd perhaps like to say a few words before we pass the proverbial mic over?
I'd like to say that I was on the interviewing panel that gave you the job, along with Lyndon Wing, and it was a great decision. In actual fact, Michelle was on the you went for the job as well, and we were caught between who to appoint, and the fact was that Lyndon was so impressed with both of you that he suddenly created 2 jobs. and what a wonderful appointment. And the second thing is to say is that we came to that little unit where we weren't where we are now, where we were somewhere else down in the south wing. We were refugees from nursing, sorry Julian, and you were refugees from education, I think.
Yep.
So we both came fairly wounded, but formed a great kind of collaboration of 2 disciplines working together, but working fairly well. And I think that was to do in many ways with the values of the disability group. The thing that struck me about the values of the disability teaching team was its approach to students. It was genuinely caring, but genuinely scholarly. And it stayed with me all the time, the way in which, I presume you still do, but the way in which you really care about your students. So admirable, and much to do with your leadership in the past few years.
Thank you, Eileen. Thank you.
Now I'm going to cry.
I'll keep it tame. I had the pleasure of, I'm Kerry Bissaker from Education, and I had the pleasure of meeting Caroline when she was a student before our units divorced. Yeah, we had a wonderful, yes, before we divorced. But Carol and I, decided that, and I was so pleased when she was appointed as an academic after finishing her PhD, and it didn't take very long to find ways that we could continue to work together. And one of those ways was through our international work. And I knew Caroline was a person that I needed in some of the work that we were doing in Singapore in the early days, and she, continues to do that work for us, which is fantastic. But the word that comes to mind with, all of the work that we did in several countries, was
Mojito?
Mojito. That's a good word. Yeah, they're always safe. We know that mojitos are safe.
That's right.
Is the word empowerment. And wherever she has worked and whatever she has done, it's about empowering other people to take control of their lives in any way that they can, so that they achieve what it is that they really want to. And I think your story really captured that really well as well. Her never say no attitude has actually led to incredible, intensities of work. But it was very interesting yesterday, and the travel that she's engaged in, and a lot of it off her own desire to continue to work with the areas that she knows are so, really desperate to learn. And the good thing about it is that we know that we're not people that will go into a country and say, this is the way you should do it. It's about listening and saying, how is this working for you? So a deep intercultural understanding that she's developed over that time as well. But what was interesting, I was at a luncheon yesterday about international students and the contribution they make to our economy here in South Australia. And it was interesting to know that for every 4 students that arrive, it creates 1 job here in South Australia. And I'd like to say you've actually contributed to the employment rate no end. Because a huge amount of people have come specifically to Flinders University because of the work that you have done internationally. And I think that, and for me it was a great pleasure to work with you and see you perform in front of some pretty significant people in terms of their positions, to actually have them listening and wanting to continue to engage. You have been an outstanding ambassador for Flinders University, and our loss is certainly UniSA's gain. And I know that many of the partnerships that you actually have generated will probably be directed to UniSA now, but I hope that we can continue to work on. But it is with huge admiration of what you've done, not just for Flinders University, but literally the state and for other people in other developing nations. Just outstanding, awesome,
I think most of you guys all know me, and a lot of you guys have known me before I knew you, but I'm her little daughter, I guess. I don't look so little anymore, but to be honest, I never thought I'd ever be here doing this. My whole life has been living and breathing Mum's Flinders. Most of the stuff that has made me has been due to what she does in her amazing community, and a lot of the stuff that's helped me as somebody who lives with a disability has been a lot of the stuff, a lot of the people that helped me at school or have helped me before, Mum taught. And I think if she hadn't, my life personally would have been a whole lot worse, but I can't imagine what it's like for people before me who didn't have that chance. But I also, it's okay, Mum, but I also, you know, lived at home with her, and I saw all the hard times she had and, you know, all the good times, but the memories Mum had were really important, and you guys are all really, oh, don't cry, I forgot what I was going to say now. You guys were all really important to her, and I think that as Mum moves on, I want you guys to know how much you guys meant to our family and how much a lot of you guys created me. I mean, some of the amazing stuff that I can just see so many faces. I went to your first baby's baby shower. First baby shower I ever went to. It was a little bit weird. I was like, what, 8 maybe? Or, you know, Peggy took us in for Christmas this year, or Julie's kids, or Charmaine, who used to take me on days, or I remember coming into the office and seeing so many more of you in your offices. You know, walking down the hallway, getting drinks, tripping over, falling in front of Pammy's office once. I don't think she remembers that, but I fell straight on my face. And, you know, I don't know what it's going to be like not going into that office anymore, you know, when I have a free day, or when Mum wants to go to choir once in a blue moon. But I just wanted to say thanks to all you guys, and, you know, thank you, darling.
Oh,
Just, oh my gosh,
how do you top that? Because she's right. Most of you knew her before she knew her. Wow. Well, in 1989, I as a high school dropout, so I didn't finish year 12. I didn't get an ATAR. I was a bit of a rebel, as Brian found out later. So I left school in 1980, not having finished year 12, having left in August before my exams in October, which probably wasn't really very clever, but and I actually went to work in law. So I worked for a number of law firms in Adelaide, and I spent my time serving con politis and others with bankruptcy and liquidation notices for not paying their bills. And thought that I wanted to go into law, but all the time I was involved in the arts. So I was involved with the YMCA, teaching dance to children and young adults in Morphett Vale and Christie's Beach and Hackham, so they tended to be young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. And then I started doing camping, so I started leading groups of campers, and I got involved in youth politics and was sent overseas to represent Australia when I was 19 or 20 to the YMCA World Congress, which was 300 or 400 men basically from Europe and the United States. Australia was the only country to send women and women under 25 was like almost not heard of. So my friend and a woman who's now works is the assistant principal of a special school in Sydney, she and I went. And it was through that I, through my work, I ended up working for the YMCA. When the Rupert Murdoch Fairfax kerfuffle happened in the mid-80s, I was working for a Rupert Murdoch company, and my boss went to work for Fairfax, so I was got rid of. The YMCA offered me a job, and as working with young disadvantaged people at Hackham, and I wanted more work. I was only a part-time job. I was in my mid-20s, and they said, a colleague who was a registered mental deficiency nurse said, why don't you go and work at Strathmont? There's a guy, Freddie Brincat, out there. He runs the rec department. You know, you would probably really love it. So I applied for a job out there, and they offered me a job, and they offered me a job as a home assistant, so as a support worker. But I really wanted to work in Freddie's team. So every day when the ladies that lived in Pungari would go over to the rec department, none of the other support workers wanted to take them on. I was like, I'll go. So I used to go over there and sit there in my blue culottes or whatever uniform we used to have to wear and look at Freddie and go, I really, really want to work in his department. But as it happened, my career kind of took off a little bit, and I never ended up actually working for Freddie. Now he's here because he, along with Brian and Richard, was part of my very early career in that I came to uni, and I got a job at IDSC in the South as the Pathways Coordinator, and I never forget, I was working in the Western region by then, so I'd left Strathmont and was working in the West as a support worker, and I applied for this job as the Pathways Coordinator, and I got my letter saying, you've got a job interview at 1 o'clock. And so anyway, I'm sitting there with the DE that was there at the time, practicing for my interview, and the phone rings at 10 o'clock, at 10:05. And I answer the phone, they go, oh, Caroline, it's Tessa Barber, or Bishop from IDSC, saying, where are you, your interview? I said, no, my interview's at 1 o'clock. She said, no, it's 10 o'clock. So I'd misread it. And I was devastated. She said, don't worry, just come straight away. So I got there and I sat down, and anyway, I got the job. And she did tell me years later that as long as I had 2 arms, 2 legs and was breathing, I was going to get the job. But I went, oh, that was good to know. But anyway, so I worked for IDSC for quite a while, and the opportunities that I had working with that team, so I worked part-time as a support worker and actually part-time as the Pathways Coordinator because it wasn't a full-time job. And then I picked up work in social housing. I was the Housing Spectrum Coordinator for a while. So in those years I had an opportunity to do a range of things, but I was also studying at Flinders. So I sat the mature age entry and got into the course then, and I was studying part-time. So I was a bugger, because I worked in the sector. So I gave the lecturers, Brian, Verity, John, Jerry, I gave them a really hard time because I questioned everything based on, well, you're teaching me this theory, but this is what actually happens, when I go to work this afternoon. So, but they were really important people, and Jerry and Verity and John and Brian and John Forston, who was there, Trish Reese, Roger Reese, were really important people that were very encouraging of me and always pushing me, always willing to have a debate or an argument. Roger would take me to lunch at the staff club when it used to be there at Flinders and try and get me to see his point of view. So we'd generally just spend an hour arguing, and when I thought I pushed him too far, I'd come back to my pigeonhole and there would be a book with an inscription in it, basically, saying that he understood what I was trying to say. So along the way, my early career, I was kind of insular. I was very involved in IDSC and the department. But then when I got a job is when I finished my PhD at last, after having several supervisors because people kept leaving the university. Michelle and I worked really closely together in that first year when we were waiting for Ruth Crocker to come. Ruth's here.
And then the lunches started.
That's right. So we worked together, and so then the team started to build, and I think that was a really important time. And I think when I finally became head of discipline after I did have that meltdown, I'm so sorry, Brian. was about Brian certainly handed over to me a really solid framework of a program. You know, a lot of the hard yards have been done in terms of the majors in health science and the double degrees with it, you know, in education have been flagged. We had the health science one settled, we had the psychology and behavioural science well settled, and that was a lot of work that Brian had done, as well as this sense of going to be external. And I think that was a huge step, and Brian and I worked really closely for about 2 years on getting that to happen. And then along the way, once we had those other programs with health science and behavioural science, so then came the opportunities to work across the disciplines. Then came the opportunities to work with academics from other areas, and I really enjoyed that. I thought there was real value in that, and I saw the value for our students that are doing the BDDE, but I also saw the value for the students doing behavioural science or health sciences, and so I really became quite passionate about this kind of collaboration, as well as trying to sort of be like stepchildren with my colleagues in education, where we were trying to meet in secret, you know. But the international became really important, and I have to thank Kerry. I have followed in Kerry's footsteps in the sand the entire way, and I still do. My first AAF came because Kerry had done one in education and disability, and they wanted one not around school settings, and Kerry just went, oh, I don't do that, but I know someone who does. And DFAT rang me, and Kerry so generously said, you've got like 3 days to write this massive application. I'll just take mine and do a save as, and where it says special ed, put disability and community inclusion, which I did. And I got it. So that was like really, you know, so it was that, like Flinders has been amazing. And then, you know, you start supervising research high degree students, and you start to then have that joy of working with students and Vicky and others, and seeing them grow and progress, and seeing them, you know, graduate, and how good that feels when one of your masters or honours or research, you know, when an honours student gets a first class, I don't know who celebrates more, the student or us. Mm-hmm. Or when, you know, is Peter gone? Yes. When Peter Walker got his PhD today, you know, how really exciting it is when you see people make that achievement. So I've not done this ever on my own, you know. Being part of the School of Health Sciences was really exciting. You know, last year I'd met Sylvia with my Myanmar AAF, and she'd done bits, but we hadn't crossed paths very much. She did her thing, I did mine. You know, the feedback was fantastic. An opportunity arose for Sylvia to actually come and help with Emily and come and help supervise the students. And, you know, that was an amazing experience, and it formed a friendship and a working relationship that will last forever, without any shadow of a doubt, because what Sylvia offers is what I'm lacking. And I think I've been very lucky like that my whole career. I've had the ability to reflect and go, I'm not particularly good at that, but I know someone who is, you know. And I think that I've been very, very fortunate to be surrounded by people that have those amazing skills. And for many years in the international, Peggy, Julie and Amanda were absolutely critical to my success in the international space. Because when Flinders called upon me to do things that I needed to do that weren't in the international space, I knew that those three were there to support the people from overseas. And even now when I travel to those places, the first thing they always say to me is, how's Julie? How's Amanda? How's Peggy? You know, before they've even really said hello to me. So I think that that's really, you know, really, really important. And, you know, practicums have always been really important to me. I think they're one of the strongest elements of our program is the pracs and the relationships we have with agencies, with the community re-entry program, with CBS and with everybody else. And they're critical to our students actually going out and having a number of real world experiences before they graduate and they come out ready to work. And for Charmaine for taking, and Peggy for taking that on when Michelle and I had to step up to other things, has been quite incredible. And the program has gone from, you know, Brian handing over a really stable in the black, program, it really allowed us as a team to take it forward, to move into this. So when Kerry said there was an opportunity for us to really move into the international space, we were able to do that because of what we'd inherited and because of the relationships we had with stakeholders like CBS. And along the way, Julian, Pauline, all these other people, even Julie Ratcliffe, we've done a swap over in the car park. I'm going to UniSA, she's coming back to Flinders, which is a bit of a shame because I really wanted to go to UniSA because you were there. But anyway, it's what the most important thing for me in taking on this new challenge has been the fact that I have such strong relationships back at Flinders. And the most important thing to me was academic status, was getting that academic status so that I can continue to collaborate, not just with the people in the disability team, but, I still have thoughts when I was in Bali a few weeks ago carrying buckets of sand and bricks up Mount Agung to build an accessible house for a young woman who I met with the students on New Colombo Plan that was living in a situation that I wasn't prepared to continue to see happen. I met an audiologist and I was immediately thinking about Sharosh and the team going, Bali does very little or no research around hearing impairment and what is going on there. And, I went to Suwong Dump with the students with the New Colombo Plan because I was asked by Rumba Siat, a woman, Sue Bishop, that I met with the students, and I said, what would you like us to do? And she said, I need you to play with the children and distract them as you do while the audiologists pull the bugs out of their ears. I went, okay. Now, I've seen a lot. I've been everywhere. I've seen a lot. I was not ready for the smell or what it means for 250 families to live in that dump in Bali. And I wasn't prepared for what it was to watch an audiologist pull in large insects out, and not just out of multiple children's ears, because they lay on the ground and they sleep in, they don't sleep in beds and the insects crawl in and it affects their hearing. And we were also doing a non-formal screening in playing with the children for any children that we thought might have had other disabilities that were not being recognised. And so there were a few children that we managed to say, I think that child probably needs to go and visit the hospital and visit the team there. So, I'm incredibly fortunate to have been able to do that. It was an honour to carry, 200 buckets of sand up Mount Agung the other week. It's an absolute honour to see, if you see my Facebook, to have Samatri, who was sleeping in bamboo poles with rice bags around them, that when it rained, she got wet. It was an honour to watch her cut the ribbon on her house, and she slept in a bed with sheets and a blanket and a roof and gutters and electricity. So, I just want to say thank you to you all for each and every one of you has in some way put me on that mountain with her last week. And the classic, if you want to hear my classic story about diagnosis, is they said to me that Samatri was deaf and blind, and I met her, and Ashley Miller, the student that came with me in November, said she's not deaf and blind. I said no, she's not. And how do we do that without offending, being culturally sensitive? So I'm there at lunch 2 weeks ago, and it's raining now, so the building had stopped, and I'm holding 2 bricks, and there's about 150 people had come to help move the stuff from the road so the builders could build. And I just stood behind her wheelchair, and I just dropped, accidentally of course, the 2 bricks on the ground. And I watched Samatri jump, and I turned around and said in front of everyone, "Oh, Samatri, did you hear that?" And everyone went, "Oh, maybe she's not deaf." I said, "I don't think," and she's laughing. So I'm going, "Oh." And they said, "Oh, so they were talking, saying, oh, we still think she's blind." So the next day at lunchtime again, there's another a different 150 people hanging around, carting stuff up the road. And I grabbed a bucket and I went up to her and I went, "I'm so sick of carting these effing buckets up the hill. I'm going to just tip this on your lap. And she cracked up laughing, absolutely cracked up laughing. And so people went, oh, maybe she's not blind either. Maybe she's probably not. And so then we had this big discussion about locked-in syndrome, and then I'm teaching her mum how to give her a drink in the mud, in the rain, halfway up Mount Lagoon at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There's no clinic. It's, this is what you do. And I know that I wouldn't be there doing that work if it wasn't for every single person in this room and everything that you've taught me, that you've contributed to me. Vicky teaches me all the time about cultural understanding, about what it means to be a white middle-class person in a position of power, and how I work in those environments without, waving that around. And that's really important to me. And so, everybody in this room has taught me something. So when you see on Facebook that I'm doing this stuff, you can all go, because in some way you've all contributed, and many more people that are in this room have helped me get to that point where I can pretend to throw a bunch of a whole bucket of sand on someone and finally have people in Bali go, oh, maybe she's not deaf and blind. So my next job is to learn from Pammy's stuff and to go back there and try and teach her a communication system of some sort so that she can actually have a say about, because the classic of all classic was, as I left to go to the airport to come home, Puck Lutcher said to me, who is fantastic, he said to me, Caroline, what's your favourite colour? And I said, Biru, which is blue. Why? And he said, oh, because we want to paint Samatri's house and we thought we'd paint it blue if that's your favourite colour. I said, how about we ask Samatri what her favourite colour is and we paint her house that colour? And he went, oh yeah. Always a lesson to be learned. Yes, Puck Lutcher, there's always a lesson to be learned. So let's not paint her house yet, and I'm coming back in April and we'll try and work out what her favourite colour is and we'll paint her house that colour. And if it's purple with pink dots, then that's just fine by me. So, so thank you to everyone who's been around since the 1987 when I first started. But the final person I need to thank is Philip and Milla and Megan and Abby, because he's the one that, just does everything when I'm not around. He's the one when I'm crying and throwing a tanty on a Sunday night at midnight because I haven't finished something. He reads it for me, he edits it for me. He's the person I ring when my computer won't do what I want it to. And I met him back in 1991 when I was doing a PowerPoint presentation with Roger to the International Neuropsych Conference, where I told them all that I thought standardised testing for people with a disability sucked. Now, I didn't realise back then that going to a group of international neuropsychs and telling them that basically their trade of standardised testing, which is what they do, and going there and having the guts to say, I did this research and I don't think your process has actually worked for this population of people, I was probably a bit brave, really. But Philip helped me do a PowerPoint because they were the days when you couldn't actually do your own PowerPoint. So, but thank you, darling. Thanks for everything. Thanks for all the dinners, all the, the tantrums, and thanks for looking after all the international guests that turn up at our house, all the students that turn up at our house. Thanks for coming overseas with me and holding your own at the other end of the table in whatever country I happen to be in when I'm only one person and, there's 25 people at the table and you can hold your own at the other end of the table, keeping the conversation going. So I'm very lucky to have a partner that understands what I do the way he does, and he's just as happy carrying buckets of sand, although he didn't do any this time, and that will be next time when we do Puck Lunner's house. That can be a job. He's kind of there behind me all the way, and so I have to say thank you for that. And to my older girls, Megan and Abby, who are not here, who are also incredibly supportive. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. And this is not I don't see this as the end. I see this as just the beginning. So I have academic status, I have no micromanagement, and absolute freedom to do whatever I like. So any research ideas that you have, and they gave me resources as well to make that happen. So anyone who wants to do research with me, please let me know. So I'll be at McGill in the Amy Wheaton in office 315 on the ground. Hey, where you are on the ground level. I even have my name on my office now. So, but thanks everybody, and thanks.
Photos on Facebook
Yeah.
as well too. Very nice. But on behalf of everyone, absolutely here to honour and to
Thank
welcome you into the next stage of your life, and thank you for the incredible passion that you've brought to us as students and as colleagues, and the level of creativity, and it has been an honour learning from you and working with you for a few years. But
I'm so sorry about the pass I gave you for Prac A.
Long-term memories.
Brian-
Long-term memories.
Brian failed me from my shaping and fading assignment in the topic.
It all comes back.
It all comes back.
In our last 2 hours of life, this is what we're going to be relearning. That's right. Excellent, but no, this is a celebration of the next steps, and we continue to look forward to.
Well, I really hope it's a step forward for the DE profession. That's my aim. Is that it's kind of dangerous for DEs to have all our eggs in one basket. You know, I think the best thing for the developmental education profession is that we spread our wings. So I won't be, I'll come. I'm not doing any teaching this year, so I'm up for guest lectures if anyone needs one. So,